now, the three lit chicks. I'm Carrie Harris from Hillwood.
Misty Shea from Central.
Lauren Stetler, Keller Middle.
And we are here for episode 5. Yes, 5.
And it's going to be historical.
Oh, there it is. It was coming. You had to know it was coming. She tried it last time and the internet froze on her. So now delivery was awesome right there. So yeah, we are here to talk about some historical fiction. Audrey, are you there to remind people how to get to the chat?
I am. Hey, folks. So if you cannot see the chat box, if you would click on your profile icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and then click Create Channel. It is not going to do anything scary or fancy. Don't worry, you won't be the next YouTube star. It'll just let you see the chat window and participate in our chat tonight.
And that was Audrey Wilson Youngblood. She is the librarian at Keller High. Shout out to Audrey for being our behind the scenes Wizard of Oz, don't look behind the curtain person.
But if you do look behind the curtain, she's very helpful.
She is. She's good at stuff and things.
Lots of stuff and things.
That's its own emoji.
I know. I love it. It's my favorite.
As you can see from our ad from this week, we are here to talk about historical fiction. And we've got some really good titles to talk about. I threw up one of my, one of my most favorite Martin Luther King quotes. I think it's very reflective of our world today. And unfortunately, and fortunately at the same time, we just need to find ways that we aren't silent about the things that are happening. And I feel like historical fiction is a great way to break down that silence, because you can read about things that happened so long ago and hopefully learn a lesson from it. And there's a lot of lessons.
That Bitmoji theme, can you share our front cover so they can see that again?
Did I not share it? Am I losing already in this wonderful
No, I almost was teary-eyed. I was almost misty-eyed at your beautiful speech there, but I wanted them to get the full effect with Martin Luther King and the quote. It was gorgeous.
Well, see, the problem is I thought I was sharing and I wasn't. So there you go. Now we can see our beautiful quote up there.
I love it.
Anyway, no, there's a lot of nice things that can be shared about the past and learn from the past. And we have a lot of great things to talk about with our historical fiction tonight. We have everything from true historical fiction to some historical fantasies and things like that. So lots of historical fiction. This is what you wanted. This is what you asked for. So we made sure that we provided that to you. We do have a special guest tonight. Her name is Jennifer Latham. She wrote the book Dreamland Burning, as you saw on the ad, on the little graphic. She's not here yet, and as soon as she does join us, Miss Youngblood will let her in, and we will let her talk to us about her book. She told me she would be trying to come in at about 8:05, and it is almost that time. Ladies, did you want to say anything before we get started? We'll give her about another minute to join us.
So I always love reading just a little bit on the historical fantasy or I love when two genres mash. So like when you get historical with like horror or thriller or fantasy, like one of my favorite books is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. And I'm not gonna lie, I would have never ever read an Abraham Lincoln biography, autobiography, any of that junk, because it's not my thing. But boy, did I love, and they still, like, the authors like infused all this rich history in it. So I learned a lot of stuff, except when his son died. His son didn't die from whatever disease it was at that time. He died from being bitten by a vampire. So of course, like, that made me like, yes, vampire slaying right here. But so I do really enjoy those mixtures of the historical, all those facts and all that amazingness of that time period. And then of course adding in a little bit of, the fantasy or the horror element and all of that stuff. So, but
I didn't shy away from that this week. I definitely dove way into all of that, going very historical fantasy with some, and so I'm excited to show you some of that. And historical horror, gruesome. I'm really excited about it.
Looks like we have Miss Latham about to join us once she gets all hooked up here. I'm very excited to see her and meet her. Not in person, but
And I'm going to try to not swoon because I have author like fangirlism. Is that a word? I'm going to make it a word.
Hello.
Yeah.
I believe you're still muted.
Bingo.
There it is. Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm the one that was emailing you.
Carrie, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. We have Misty and Lauren here.
Okay.
They're my fellow librarians, and then Audrey is the cute little Bitmoji there at the bottom, but she is operating from behind the scenes. So yeah, we're waiting for you to join us so we could talk about your book.
Okay.
Yeah, I had actually, let me share my screen so I can put up a book cover for just a minute so that people can see what it looks like.
And our audience is already excited about Jen. They're saying hi and thank you for being here. Yay!
Tell them I'm happy to be here. That looks amazing.
So this is the awesome cover. The cover drew me right in when I first saw it on the shelf. And I wanted to see what it was about. But I want you to tell us about the book and a little bit about kind of your processes that you went through, and also kind of the reason why. I know it was an untold story for a very long time, and kind of how you stumbled upon that.
Okay. I'll try to do this really concisely. First of all, thank you for complimenting the cover. I can brag on that and not feel like somebody else did it, and she did an amazing job. She works at Little Brown. So I love that cover too. In terms of the book, did you do a quick summary, or should I do that?
No, we haven't done a thing. We were going to wait for you to join us because I figured you would probably do a great job at telling about your book more than I would.
I don't know. I've had librarians actually ask me where I would shelve this.
Oh.
And I don't know the answer to that. It's a historical novel set both in modern day Tulsa, Oklahoma, and also Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, in the days leading up to the Tulsa Race Massacre. It starts off in the contemporary timeline when a young woman who lives in an affluent neighborhood in Tulsa goes out to the guest house, which would have been servants' quarters in 1921. She's biracial. Her mom is Black, her dad's white. And Rowan goes out, she's 17 years old, first day of summer vacation, and finds a skeleton in the back house that some workers have uncovered by digging up the floor. And then her chapters alternate with Will's chapters. Will lives in 1921 in Tulsa. He's also biracial. His mom is a member of the Osage tribe, which, if you've read Killers of the Flower Moon, that is about the murder of Osage people in the 1920s and early 30s. And his dad is white. And Will's chapter starts off when he's an idiot in a speakeasy and starts basically a fight that ends up harming an African-American man. And Will doesn't realize the events that he's setting in motion at that point. So as Rowan tries to figure out who the skeleton was, Will is actually living the events that lead up to that person becoming a skeleton. So at the end, it all comes together. You discover who the body belonged to. In terms of why I wrote it, I had actually read a few New York Times pieces about the race massacre, which was broadly referred to as the race riot then. I read those pieces when we lived in Rhode Island in 2001 or 2002. And we moved to Tulsa when my husband got a job here. It was 2003. No, I'm sorry. It must have been 2000 when I read those stories. We moved here in 2001. And about 5 years later, even though I had worked as a school psychologist, I spent a year being a stand-in English teacher in a private school, a Montessori school, in a 7th grade classroom. I'm a terrible teacher, so I'm grateful to all those people who have that gift. That's why it lasted 1 year. But we went on a field trip to the Greenwood Cultural Center. And if you read Dreamland, or you read the actual history of the massacre that happened here, and actually it happened here on May 31st and June 1st. So yesterday was the 99th anniversary of the destruction of the most affluent African-American community in the country.
Wow.
So that's what the massacre was. And remind me to tell you about if you want more details of it later, but suffice it to say that it was firebombed. This really amazing community, which is still there, all of their physical possessions, and a lot of people died that night in shootings, hangings, burnings, and fire bombings. There is a place in Greenwood now called the Greenwood Cultural Center, and we took a field trip there. And there's not a lot, because when I say that everything burned down, I am not exaggerating. Everything got destroyed. So it doesn't have, the Cultural Center isn't a museum because there isn't that much there. If you watched Watchmen on HBO, they actually have reimagined that center, and it's pretty amazing. It would be cool if we could get to that point. But we took this field trip, and along the back hallway, there's a row of black and white photographs of elderly people who had been teenagers or children in 1921. So they were all survivors. All of them had since passed away. But I saw the picture of a woman, and I didn't know her name at the time. I ended up learning that it was Venice Dunn. She got married. When she passed away, her name was Venice Sims. And her eyes followed me down that hallway as I was walking with my 7th and 8th graders. And I knew that I wanted to know Venice's real story. And so I went and found a book that had an interview that she'd done with a historian. And that really is what kicked off the whole research process. I knew I would like to tell a story about this, which all of the characters in the book are entirely fictional and might reference historical figures, but all of the dialogue comes from my head, because what I realized just looking at Miss Sims' picture was that I wanted to write a fictional story because I didn't want to tell the stories of actual survivors. I wanted to write a fictional account that would get people interested enough to go and listen to the stories of the people who lived it and the descendants of the people who were either murdered that night or who survived. So I spent 2 to 2.5 years doing that research, canoodling a little bit because I'm a pantser. If you read Stephen King's book about writing, I tend to fly by the seat of my pants. And I started a real draft after 2.5 years. And over the 5 years it took to complete that and have it go into the editing process, I was still learning things up till the last minute. In hearing historical facts confirmed, like the firebombing that crop dusting planes dumped Molotov cocktails onto Greenwood, I didn't include in the book because I couldn't get historical confirmation of that. So that shows you how our understanding of history is shaped by the people who can tell it. And the fact that we didn't find this letter from an attorney who represented a lot of survivors after the massacre. His name was Buck Franklin. They actually discovered a letter that he had written contemporaneously as the firebombs were falling. So that's the one thing I would change if I had to write it all over again, because it really illustrates what a horrific, horrific thing this was. And apparently we're still going through that.
Right. We haven't learned any lessons from the past.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about when I read the book. I love historical fiction, but the murder mystery is also what kind of intrigued me when I picked it up off my shelf, which it was on historical fiction shelf in my library. But once I had absolutely no idea any of this had taken place. And I was all over the internet after I read it. I read all of the notes at the end of your book. I looked everywhere because I had never heard of such a thing. And there's even a teacher at our school who was born and raised in Tulsa. And she brought her kids in for some book talks, and I brought up this book and explained what was going on. And she was in the back with her jaw dropped. She's like, I don't even remember hearing about this when I was growing. She's rather young, so she might not have if it was just discovered in '97. But anyway, I was fascinated. And then last week, our audience asked for a lot of historical fiction this week. And it just kind of happened that I saw something. Somebody posted an article on Facebook about the riots, about the massacre. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to talk about Dreamland Burning this week. So I was so happy that you answered my Twitter plea and are here tonight.
Thank you for choosing Dreamland to talk about. I really do appreciate that. I wish it was not timely.
Yeah, exactly. Audrey, do we have any questions from our YouTube feed and that we can ask Ms. Latham about the book?
We have some comments so far. We have, that like 20-second lag. So asking them again for questions. We have a Shauna from Region 11 Service Center is with us, and she's just messaged her book club who just finished Dreamland Burning. So likely about to get another whole crop of viewers. So I'm watching for questions. I'll post those into the chat as soon as I see them.
All right.
And I'm known for swooning. I'm really sorry, but I fangirl way too easy, but I respect authors so much and what y'all are able to do. But I just think what you did was so heroic and amazing because like you said, there's so many people that don't know this story, and for you to bring it out there and put it in front of people's faces, like, you know, this happened, you need to read it and you need to learn from it. And because my biggest thing about studying history is we study history. All the kids I'm in high school. So I was like, why do we have to learn this again? I was like, because you have to have it etched in your mind. So this never happens again. So we don't repeat the past, we learn from it and we make the world better from it. So I think your book is going to really, especially now, people need books like this to see where we've been and where we're going and where we should be going. And I definitely believe that books create empathy and understanding. So thank you so much for bringing such, even though it's horrific, but bringing it to light.
Well, thank you. Authors, by the way, fangirl over and fanboy over librarians because you guys are out there on the front lines putting books in kids' hands, and that's an amazing thing. So thank you guys.
Oh, you're so sweet. Are you, can you tell us what you're working on now? Is that allowed?
Oh, absolutely. So being a writer is kind of a tough gig. I wrote an entire World War II manuscript set on a U-boat that I wrote it 2 years ago. It went on submission and 15 editors said, no, thank you. So I will be revising that. But in the meanwhile, I have been working on a book about real life Amazons who were living in the north of the Black Sea way back in Cleopatra's time. So that is the big one that I'm working on. That's, you know, YA and a lot of pages. And I just sent a little middle grade fantasy because honestly, when COVID hit, my daughter came home from college, my other kids home from high school, and my brain just would not focus on 100,000 word manuscript. So I just finished a little fantasy just so that I was writing something that felt good and warm and kind in these times right now.
And I love that your brain can switch. Like, I feel like I would get on a tangent.
I can one day say that I was just, I couldn't concentrate. So I went over here and wrote a book. I love that.
I have the luxury of a private space. So we have a converted garage apartment. So I go out there with the dogs and we just kind of hide. And I'm also fortunate enough to have kids who are old enough to take care of themselves at this point. My heart is with all those parents out there trying to handle little ones and do school and work. And
mine's looking at me through the glass doors.
We have a question. You mentioned not wanting to tell the survivor stories. Is there a story you've since heard that you wish you would have woven into the narrative?
Not a true survivor story.
Okay.
Because I think it's really important, especially because I'm a white writer, I am not speaking and I don't feel qualified or like it's my right in any sense to tell the story of someone who went through that. I did make my characters biracial because as I was writing the story, writing from a purely white kid's viewpoint would have been a white savior narrative. There would be no way around it. I had to include characters who represented the population of Tulsa at that time. So I tried to add like to the contemporary African-American character. She's privileged because she's really wealthy. I'm not personally really wealthy, but but by making her in that position, I was trying to incorporate some of my own privilege and recognize that would influence her experience if she had shared some of that. I think I got a little bit off track on the question.
No, that's right. That's perfect. And then I love how you incorporated the Native American because that's Oklahoma. That's, you're going into that area where there are just a lot of that's very prevalent. So that's beautiful. What are you currently reading?
I actually, since I just finished writing, I cannot read while I'm writing. I watch old Law and Orders and The Office just obsessively.
Do you do the SVU?
I can't do SVU with the dead babies. I just can't.
Once you have babies, it just doesn't, you can't watch it anymore.
That's weird, I guess. I don't know why I love that one so much, but I shouldn't.
You used
Oh,
to.
I'm not a sociopath, I promise.
No, I have a daughter who loves it. But actually, that's not true. As I was working on this book, I was parsing out just sections of Jacqueline Woodson's Red at the Bone, which also talks about survivor trauma and descendants of the massacre. So it's a good shift away from Dreamland, which I can say is historically as accurate as I could have made it. But in terms of a representative perspective about how a person in the African American community might feel today as a descendant of a survivor, it's a beautiful book, and then it incorporates that, and it's so important. And I picked up a pirate book today because
It's pirates.
yeah,
Because of pirates.
maybe down the road after the Amazons there can be pirates.
For the same reason I had to read some sci-fi this week. I've been doing a lot of realistic and historical. I needed a little sci-fi in my life. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah, everybody here is reading, like the rest of the family, they're all swapping Dune books because they're very excited about the new
love
movie.
Dune. Oh my, I read that in high school, like the whole series. Oh my
It's
god.
still really good. Yeah.
Oh my
That's about
god.
to become like a thing again. Like they're making a movie.
Yes, who is it? He played Laurie in Little Women. He's going to be all yeah.
Although I'm never gonna not be able to see Lori though.
Yeah.
I'll try really hard.
It's funny because this is the second time Dune has come up in our talks.
Oh, funny.
It's a classic. Well, it's not a classic. I hate telling the kids that because it's not a classic, but I do nerd out with that one. I've always been an avid reader, so I had to read that, and they're thick.
Yeah.
But they do need to come out with better covers though, because some of my kids will look at it and they're like, and I'm like, it just needs some paint and a new cover.
Once the movie
It's
comes
like
out,
a house, you paint it and it's brand new.
Give it a movie.
So hopefully they'll do like the movie / Netflix, covers, and then the kids will be like, whoa, I just saw that. Speaking of 3-year-olds.
At least he had clothes.
Looks like we have another question. Question is, when I have shared about the book on social media, my Oklahoma friends were quiet. How was this book received in Oklahoma? Were there any pushbacks?
I have been fortunate. The main pushback I've gotten has been about the Native American depiction on social media. And I understand and respect that. I did have people who represented 2 readers from each of the 3 tribes that are included in the book. So before it went to press, before it ever went to the editor, I had made sure that, at least in my readers' eyes, I was doing a respectful job. In Oklahoma, it's actually being used in a lot of schools, and I thought the reception has been fairly okay here. I do a lot of school visits, which is fun, and I try not to go on social media, so I might not have seen the pushback if there is any.
I wonder if some of the quietness is because they really don't know about the entire situation at all. I mean, they know it, but they don't really know. So
it's part of 9th grade Oklahoma history here now, but I have seen the textbook that had been used prior to this point, and it's a paragraph or 2, which, given the magnitude of the situation, but the state did announce new curriculum guidelines, and those have a lot of primary source documents. There's a list of it. If you go to the Oklahoma Department of Education, if you Google it, race massacre, then you can find that curriculum.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to quiz my cousins now. My cousins have lived in Oklahoma. My aunt and uncle went to school there, and so they ended up staying there. I'm gonna have to quiz them now and be like, so what do you know? Guess you gotta go read now, huh?
that's right. I got a good book choice for you.
It wasn't just the white community. Obviously, the 2 white newspapers that survived the massacre, 2 black-owned newspapers were destroyed. Their presses were destroyed. Their reporters were incarcerated or had fled or were dead. They took control of the narrative. So the day on June 1st, the Tulsa World, which was one of the 2 papers, their headline was basically just about the white people who died. But it wasn't just the white community that made it go away. I actually went to a discussion by 5 older African Americans who had graduated from Booker T. Washington High School, which in the story is the story that Joseph goes to. He lives in Greenwood. He's African American. It was an all-black high school in 1921. It was one of the only buildings that survived the burning, and now it's moved to a different campus, but that school is still a Tulsa high school. And I went to this gathering of descendants of survivors, or at least residents of Greenwood. And they had not heard about it till they were in their 50s, their 60s. One woman had a great aunt who told her about it. She was in her 30s. So this was a story that just disappeared.
Wow.
Black and white Tulsans.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Kind of like the Osage murders, yeah.
Which is now, what was the name of the book you said you read about that?
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Okay, I've got to look into that one. I had not heard of that one yet.
I first proposed a book about those murders. It was actually the way the FBI started. It's a fascinating story. So Killers of the Flower Moon is a great narrative nonfiction about it.
I'm going to look into that.
Yeah. And it's going to be a big movie. It's going to be Leo DiCaprio, and Scorsese is directing it. So that's going to be a big movie.
Yeah, that's a powerhouse movie right there.
It's problematic. Having spoken with some members of the Osage tribe, they have some worries, but they actually, someone I respect very much, who is an elder, actually said that the research in Killers of the Flower Moon is pretty impeccable. So
Good.
Something that needs to be brought to light, just like the Tulsa massacre. Well, we appreciate your time so much for coming in to our little event that we do, that we're trying to get off the ground. I don't think we have any other questions in the chat. I know that several people did join in, like Audrey said. She contacted, and so there was someone who's out from Weatherford, and they came in to see. But we appreciate your time, and good luck with all your future books. They sound exciting. I can't wait to look for your name.
No, I'm going to stalk you on Twitter now in a very safe and respectful way.
I'm very boring on Twitter. Thank you all. Read on.
Thank you. All right.
Oh my
I
gosh.
think probably, I'm not a huge historical fiction person, but I think hearing the authors talk about their process and how much research they do and making it so authentic, that's my favorite part of reading that piece, is just seeing how historically accurate it is. That's amazing.
Yeah, and the reason she said she wanted it to be fiction because she didn't want to tell a survivor's story. She was too worried about it not being accurate.
Yeah.
And most of those people, all of those people, I think by now have passed away, and she can't ask a lot of people. So I respect that. That's pretty amazing. Y'all read that book. It's not only is it a lot about that story, it's the murder mystery in the contemporary setting of this book, as she investigates, because she has lived in this home. This girl has lived in this home her family has lived in it for generations. So she knows that this body had to have been buried and hidden by someone in her family through the generations. So she is investigating her own family, and then we're watching it happen from the boys' point of view, and then they just kind of like all of a sudden blend, and you're like, you thought you knew, and then you didn't. And it's an amazing book.
Those are my favorite. When I can't figure it out, oh my gosh, I'm like, what?
Oh, well, when I think I have it figured out, but of course, we think, but we're never correct. But that was fun. Let's move on to Lauren's book.
Oh, okay. Stalking Jack the Ripper. Okay, so I told you guys I didn't do full just historical. So this one is historical / mystery / horror. And when I say horror, I mean we're talking Jack the Ripper. These were seriously brutal murders. This is in 1888. A little way back history there, but fantastic time. So Audrey Rose is our main character, or one of two main characters, and she is highborn in London society, and she is sneaking around behind her dad's back to learn what's the word?
The morgue.
No, there's
Autopsies.
Yes, it's doing autopsies, but there's a name for it.
Medical examiner.
Yeah, there's another thing. I can't. Audrey, help me here.
Coroner?
No, I'll think of it eventually. It's okay. She is learning how to do these investigations on the dead bodies, and it is fantastic because she then also meets one of her uncle's students at the, of course, all boys school, forensic medicine. That is what I was trying to think of.
Ooh, that's fancy. I wouldn't have come up with that one.
I'm not entirely insane. Okay, so she's learning forensic medicine from her uncle. Well, then the student comes in of his, and this is Thomas Cresswell. Hello, Thomas Cresswell. Hello, book boyfriend. He is super smart, very sarcastic, and very devilish. He tries to push her buttons, and she's okay with that, and I really love that. It's a very playful banter back and forth. So while you have this sort of playful bit here, there is carnage going on. It is awful. These murders, these women are turning up murdered all over town, and they are the ones then, of course, who then go and inspect the body because her uncle is very highly valued for his work in the community. All the while she's being chastised for being there every time because she's a woman. So there's a lot of different things going on in this book, different things that you can look at, but it really is, I hate to say it, fun. Please don't think I'm crazy, but it's a fun book to read.
It is.
There's murder, there's romance, there's, crazy things that happen. And what I love, all of the mentions of different classic novels, but the one they really zero in on is Frankenstein. And there's a lot of quotes pulled from Frankenstein and pieces woven into it, and it's fantastic. So super fun one to fangirl over. If you need something to really fangirl over, it's a whole series. It's awesome.
So when I was reading about it, when I was putting the slides together, I saw that there was a lot of the Victorian age kind of situations. So whenever she's, you said the guy is just kind of like punches her buttons. Is it all done in the whole proper Victorian way, that kind of thing?
No, it's written very modern, and that was what I liked about it. I'm not one that likes, all the period stuff, and that does not interest me.
I feel like the main character, she talks about that though. She's like, well, it's not proper, but this, and I'm going to do this, and no one knows it's me anyway, so I'm going to go over here, and I'm supposed to be coming out this season, but blah.
Yeah, she's a very modern way of thinking.
The disclaimer, when they go through the mortician stuff, they describe it. I was like, I just kind of glazed over it, and I was like, oh, Mr. Cresswell. Okay. But no, they do describe some stuff. So be ready. If you're squeamish, just kind of, when you get squeamish over or embarrassed over kissy scenes, you just kind of go really fast. When they start describing the autopsy, just keep going. Just.
But there's important information given there.
Well, I did say that it was recommended mostly for high school, and for any older middle schoolers who can handle the gruesomeness.
It's a high school Battle of the Books book this year, so make sure.
It is a high school Battle of the Books.
Yes.
I love it though.
All righty, let's see what we have up next with Miss Shay.
Oh my gosh. So I've been wanting to read this. I actually got this book as an ARC. It's Butterfly Yellow, and I'm not even going to try to say the author's name because I will not do it justice, and it's just too beautiful. So this is a story of Hong, which means moon. So I'm gonna call her Moon because I'm gonna say it correctly. Her name means moon in Vietnamese. She is a refugee from Vietnam, but even before she could get to America, like her life was just so horrific. And it's right after the Vietnam War. And of course they were on the side that were helping, Americans. And so of course they were traitors. And so the communists were coming in and essentially taking over their land and their homes. And her dad was an interpreter, so he died, and slowly she's losing everybody. But the story starts out where she decides to get her and her brother to America faster, that they would pretend to be young children that these missionaries had promised to take back to America. So they're malnourished and tiny anyway. So they're posing as younger kids so that they could go to America, which is what her whole family is trying to do. And so, but they don't want her because I guess she still looks old enough, but they take her brother. And so her whole story is trying to get to her brother to get him back, to save him. But then she gets to America, and in this, you're getting her flashbacks of her journey to America, which, like I said, are horrific. She had to go on this boat and there were pirates, and all these things happened to her. But you get little nuggets of that throughout the book when she has a flashback. She comes to Texas, which I love. I don't know why I love it so much that she comes to Texas, and she talks about like Amarillo and the Paladora Canyon and stuff like that. Because that's where her brother is on a horse, near a horse farm. But she meets a cowboy named Leroy. Actually, his parents are professors. He's a wannabe cowboy. So he's what they call the diamond cowboy or the glittering cowboy, the ones that really try hard, but everything sparkles and they're not a real cowboy. Yeah. So he is, trying to join the rodeo, and he doesn't have time for this little sprite of a girl who can barely understand, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so there you have his side and her side, and it's a really sweet story, but really sad. Like this, when you get her flashbacks and you hear what happened to her family, your just heart goes out to her, and you forget about all of those people that lost everything after the Vietnam War, and then her trying to acclimate to life in America. And then when she finds her brother, does her brother even, he's been in America since he was tiny. So essentially he's been is it Americanized, right? The right word. But I mean, he just speaks English. Like he doesn't even remember how to speak Vietnamese, and he doesn't remember the past life. And so it's a huge, like, she's just constantly trying to get to even talk to her. So it's a really beautiful story. It's very short, like it's not a big book at all. It was a quick read, but it was just beautiful, sad. I think I cried a couple times, but then you're revived by Leroy and everything that kind of happens. So it's a really redeeming book, but definitely worth a really good read. I enjoyed it.
Sounds good. I don't know why I feel like there was a sequel to this, or maybe I know there was a sequel to the Inside Out and Back Again.
Yes. Yeah. She's the author of Inside Out and Back Again.
That's what I'm getting confused about. Okay. So there's not a sequel. This is not the brother of the little girl from that book, right?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No,
right.
This is a separate story.
All right. I'll have to look at that.
But Inside Out and Back Again is a great story too. Yeah, so this author knows what she's doing.
Yes. I loved it. Okay. Our next book is mine. It's called Angel Thieves, and it is the story. Gosh, there's so many stories told in this book. As you can see at the bottom, it says Thieves of Houston, that span across time. So the time period, or I'm sorry, the setting of this book is Houston, Texas. The Buffalo Bayou is actually a character in this book. Ever so often, there are many different perspectives in it. But they're all thieves if you think about it. You have a boy who works with his father, and they are poor, and they go into cemeteries, old cemeteries, and they find marble angels that are on these old, like run down, like old burial plots. And they're really old, and they always say that if the date is at least 20 years old and it looks like nobody's been putting flowers on it for a long time, they'll take the angel and they can sell it and to make some money because they're very poor. They're thieves in that sense, but they're also just a sweet, loving family. The father had him whenever he was 16. And so there's another thief involved, and that is he took possession of the boy when the baby was born, and he raised him. The mother didn't want him. And so it's almost like his mother, Cade is the boy. It's almost like Cade's mother was stolen from him. It also flashes back to a slave, a young woman who was owned by someone who took her, or found her when she was 12, took her into his home. She had 2 children by this man, but he was her slave this whole time, 2 little girls. And when he died, he promised her he would give their daughters their freedom. I'm sorry, that's wrong. He would give her freedom. And he did. He died, and he wrote it down. You are now a free woman when I die. But he didn't free the girls. He gave them to a friend. And so she has stolen her own children to run away from this other man that was going to take her children. So there's a thief there. There is the Buffalo Bayou as a character. It steals things as things settle into its water and into its sand and below the silt. And then sometimes it gives things back again. And it throws things up on its shores. There's even an ocelot who is in here, and there's even historical facts about how they used to roam this area of Texas, and now they're this rare thing that are being stolen and sold on the black market. And then an ocelot named Zora is a character, and she is stolen and she is abandoned in the bayou, and it's gut-wrenching to go through what she goes through. But it's what's really cool is at the very, as it gets to the end, you start to see all of the different things and how they're all related and how they all come together. And it's not one of those everything's wrapped up with a bow and you're like, oh, well, of course, that's how it's supposed to end. It's just got a really sweet, hopeful ending. And I learned so much about Houston or even Texas history. And I used to teach Texas history, and I don't remember this. But one of the things I learned was that there was a whole Underground Railroad, of course, during the Civil War that went north. Well, in Texas, when it was the Republic of Texas, they chose to keep slaves because Mexico chose to give up their slaves. And so Texas wanted to encourage a lot of the people from the South to come settle when it was a republic. So they wanted to say, yeah, bring your slaves. Yeah, it's still okay here. So there was a whole Underground Railroad that went south to Mexico whenever Texas was a republic. And that's what the woman who is a slave, Aza, I think it's her name, Axa is her name. She is going south to Mexico with her daughters trying to escape. So just so many cool things I learned about Texas history and about Houston that I didn't know, all woven together in something that's almost, it's not a novel in verse, but a lot of it's real poetic in the way it's written. I did listen to the audio of it, and it was good. I would have preferred the written, because I would have wanted to page back and go, oh wait, okay, that was that year, and now it's I don't know. It would have helped me, I think. But beautiful book. I really enjoyed it, and it is appropriate for middle grades and up. I don't want to discourage a high schooler from saying, oh, it's for middle grade, because the concepts and the way it was written and all the interweaving of things that I don't think a middle grade person would see. They would just be able to read it. That didn't mean they'd be able to completely get into the whole idea of it. So it's a great book.
Sounds so sad.
You know, it wasn't though. I thought it was going to be sad. You're just thinking of the ocelot, aren't you?
I have been thinking of, you said ocelot, and I can't stop thinking about it.
It's not sad. There's a lot of really sweet things in it. And I like the way it works together. It was a great book.
Good.
So let's see what we have next. I went on a little bit long. I need to stop that. I have a problem. It's a problem. Okay, there we go. Now we're into our historical fantasy. Go for it, Lauren.
Romanov. Okay, so this is what I've been listening to, and now everything in my head is done with like a Russian accent, and I can't help it. So this is the story of the last royal family in Russia. So, you know, we know about the Princess Anastasia, but that's, I mean, I think of the cartoon, and it's totally not like this at all. No, I had to go back and look up a quick history of the Romanov family. And I was astounded and just going, okay, I've followed this in the entire book. I know exactly what they're talking about, what's going on. It was amazingly historically accurate. And I thought that was fantastic. This is very well written, very well done. A lot of history, or a lot of research was done on this one for sure. Which is funny then to say about a fantasy book, because it is fantasy as well. So all of the names are the exact same. The sisters, the younger brother, he has hemophilia. It is exactly as it is in history. But the slight twist is that Rasputin is, he does spells. He's a spell worker. And the Bolsheviks have come in, and they are going in with the revolution, and they are hunting down the spell workers. And so magic is outlawed. They want everybody to be able to have it, but right now nobody can have it. And so they go through their exile in Siberia, and some of the Bolshevik soldiers then befriend them. And so you have a lot of dialogue there, which is really neat, and a great piece that adds to it. But then the magic, then there's this doll, and it has these spells that Rasputin left them to try to save their family. And so it is, you're following and she doesn't go by Anastasia, and so she goes by Nastya. And you're following Nastya and how she's trying to save her family. And like I said, I was blown away by how historically accurate this was, just with a touch of that fantasy piece woven in.
Although I've always felt like in history that Rasputin was not 100% human. Like I've always wondered if he had a little bit of like evil and magic in him. I don't know. Because you read that story and you're like, he is like the perfect Disney villain, but not Disney because he's darker than that. Like he has to have some kind of other power, otherworldly power.
Yeah, his little bat that sits on his shoulder.
Yeah. No, I wasn't thinking.
I kick you on the other knee. No, it's not like that. They paint them as a very very family-centered, loving family, and it's very interesting that the look that this author has given this family, and also Rasputin as being he was seen as such an awful person from the outside, but really he was coming in and using his magic to help the brother Alexei, who has this hemophilia, but nobody else knows about it because they can't see their future czar in such a manner. And it gives a lot of different kind of explanation, but it was just kind of a different take on that. So
I love it. That's definitely going on my TBR. My very large
cool
towering pile.
I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Do we have one more book to talk about?
Yes.
Oh,
You guys do. I'm done.
I'm done too. This is the last one, I believe.
Oh
Definitely
my gosh,
save it.
people. So this is a autobiographical-esque memoir. So George Takei, if you all remember, he was on Star Trek, and he's a huge, since then, becoming famous and all that. He's been a very large activist in all kinds of rights and just very amazing causes. So when he got together with some other writers to put this graphic novel together, this graphic novel memoir, it's beautiful. I have never cried so much reading a graphic novel in my life. Like, it was just gorgeous, and things you don't know. Like, we all kind of know, like, I feel like it's mentioned in the history books maybe once, like the lady said, the Jen said earlier, like for a paragraph about certain situations, and maybe the Japanese internment camps are mentioned, but you go through his entire journey in the graphic novel together with him. And he's a small kid. So at first he thought it was an adventure, but then later in life, he talks to his dad to figure out how it really was. And you're heartbroken. And then they weave in history, like what actually happened and when, Franklin Roosevelt, ordered these, and which governors and senators voted and what bill it was. Like, you get to know all of the history and the government things behind it. And you're horrified that America has such a stain that they thought was okay. And then, of course, this had me like ugly crying. And you're lucky that you don't see that right now. When he flashes to now with President Obama and some other things, and even more recent with the Mexican American or Mexican children in cages, I'm about to lose it again. I lost it. Like, I completely lost it, because the parallelisms are just astounding. And so this is just such a beautiful, gut-wrenching, everyone needs to read it, kind of like the Dreamland Burning, because they need to know. Because like I said, with history, if you don't know, it'll happen again, and you won't understand why it's such an atrocious stain on American history. And the fact that it even happened blows my mind, because I always want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Well, the government's doing that because of this, and they're doing this and whatever. But no, that's why we need to speak out, even when we don't agree. I read something on social media this week that sometimes silence is worse, because you're passively sitting back, letting it happen. So there's definitely a respectful way. And George Takei, he does TED Talks, and he just talks about it in a very respectful and kind manner. But he just wants the story to be heard, and how his life was, and what his parents had to go through, and the shame and the guilt and the oppression. And then of course the pictures, because it's a graphic novel, you feel like you're there with them. And then it was gut wrenching, but it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And it's actually one of our high school battle of the books as well this year. I can't wait for our students to read it. I feel like everyone needs to read it because you need to understand it and you need to gain that empathy towards a group of people that might not be look like you or come from the same cultural heritage as you do. So it's just a very amazing and beautiful book, and everybody should read it. And honestly, because it's a graphic, I think I read it in like an hour. So I definitely want to go back and cry some more so I can really make sure I didn't miss anything, because it's just beautiful. And I can't wait for everyone to read it.
I have it on order, of course. Didn't get to place that order, so I will be placing that order in July.
July 1st.
I know. I have a hard time buying graphic novels that aren't hardbound because they fall apart so easily. So I'm waiting, but that I've been hearing about this one for a very long time. And as I said last week, that's a time of history that I feel like every kid should read about, because it's not something we learn about enough in our history books, or at least we don't spend as much time on it as we should.
And most of the kids during World War II are so obsessed with the Holocaust and what happened across the ocean, oh my gosh, that they don't think about what was playing out in our own. It was all, the camps were all across America too. And I was baffled when it showed, there's a map in here that shows where everyone was located. And I was like, are you kidding me? What? Like, they were everywhere, and there were dozens, and there were levels of how much of a traitor are you? And then how American, and some, like his mother was American. Like, she was born in America. Like, and they still had to go. And it just, oh my gosh, sorry. I could talk forever, so you're gonna have to cut me off.
No, I just feel like there's so many things in the books that we talked about where, like, just the one you just mentioned, I can think of at least two other parts of history that it was repeated again. You know, you mentioned the Mexican immigration issues we had earlier. And then we also, when you mentioned, calling somebody a traitor, I think of the McCarthy era, when they just, immediately assumed someone was a communist and they put them on trial for it. And just anytime somebody's different, it's like our country still brings them forth and ridicules and doesn't just appreciate them for being different, no matter the reason that they're different.
Well, and they need to ask, why did they leave the country where their heritage is from? And why are they refugees? And why did they come over to America? And it just, if they start thinking about that, and honestly, if you want to get down and dirty, we're all immigrants. Because I have zero Native American in me. I am, shout out to Irish, Scottish, and English. Mm-hmm. Except I am 3% Russian, Romanov right here.
I'm sure you're a direct descendant.
Probably. Like, I really feel like I'm a little Black Widow-ish-esque. going comics on there. She's my favorite. Wasn't she a Romanov?
Oh, sorry. I got distracted by a comment. It says next week's request. Sorry, Carrie. Favorite series.
I love series.
Are you serious?
Oh God, every week. I'm going to expect you to do it every single time now.
We're gonna give you a list of series that you absolutely have to finish. Carrie doesn't like to finish series. She's reading the first book and then she's like, okay, next. I'm like, no,
and I can't read the last, because if I read the last, it's over. And it can't be over. So like the Red Queen series, I haven't finished the last book. I've finished most of it. I didn't finish all of the Toll. I didn't finish all of Throne of Glass, the last book. I finished the first half. Like, I'm scared.
You guys are killing me.
No, I read
all of them except for the very last book, and I will never ever read the last Game of Thrones book ever.
Okay, so next I read by myself. Favorite series.
No, I have favorite series. I just letting you know right now that I don't finish them, so don't spoil them. Well,
okay, I will do a series.
Jack the Ripper. Definitely check that one out. But yes, series. Love.
I can do series. I have read whole series. They're not going to be all that current.
That's okay.
But maybe we'll do some throwbacks for Carrie.
Well, I think we always need throwbacks, because just because it wasn't written last year or the year before doesn't mean it wasn't amazing. How long? And I know we're not going to talk about Harry Potter, but how long ago that was written? Was it 20 years ago? 23?
21?
At least, because my son's 26 and we read it when he was a kid.
So, and that series is timeless. So I think throwbacks are 100% okay.
Well, and I can still talk about what books that are good series, even if I haven't read the whole series.
Oh, like
Don't
Ender's
tell
Game?
anybody.
Ooh, Ender's Game.
No, you already said it, so now you can't talk about it.
Okay, I think we've gone kind of overboard, or not overboard. We always go overboard. We've gone over time. Overtime is not as good as being overboard. Overboard's more fun. So maybe we should end it. I want to say goodbye to everybody, but because, our world right now is crazy. It's a crazy mess. I just want to leave you back with this quote, and everybody say goodbye now, because I'm going to put it on the screen and then I'll let Audrey end it for us. But I hope everybody has a great week. Take care of each other. Be nice. That's the main thing. Be nice.
Kind.
And I just want to put this quote back up because I think it's really important. So y'all have a good week.
And come back next week for episode 6, where we get Series-us.
There it is.
I might snort. It's because I love you.
Audrey, are we still on?